What is home care? Home care is a care option that allows an older adult to live in his or her own home and be cared for by a professional. Home care services can often vary, depending on the older adult's health scenario. They can include things like personal care, bathing assistance, transportation, and specialized Alzheimer's care. Home care is also flexible in scheduling, ranging from a few hours per day to around-the-clock service. Most providers will create a unique care plan tailored to the needs of the individual. Then from there, a schedule is set for a professional caregiver to arrive at the appointed times and provide one-on-one care in the home. The three most common reasons for home care: 1. Life enhancement through social interaction and companionship. This includes such things like cooking meals, playing games, and transportation to appointments. 2. Acute care for chronic conditions such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. 3. Safety of having someone to provide personal care and administer medication, reducing the possibility of pandemic exposure. To find out more about home care, visit homeinstead.com.
Hello, welcome back. Hopefully you're coming back, and that would be great. And if this is the first session that you catch, this will be an awesome one for you to be involved with. Again, this is our No Place Like Home conference. This is our second one. We're calling it second annual, but it's only been a year, so maybe third makes sense when you say annual. It has been about a year ago that we did this. And a couple of folks to thank Home Instead and Blue Cross of Idaho, the True Blue Special Needs Plan. Check it out. And our host is the Garden Plaza of Valley View. They've been great. They bring us very good food. The pie was good, which of course is the only thing I had time to eat yesterday. Sorry, dear. I shouldn't have said that out loud. And so our theme has been a multi-generational approach to living and aging. You know this as well as I do. You see it. We've got that situation where we've got grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and then the kids, and usually it's the daughter, not the son. I don't mean to pick on us guys, but it just tends to be that way. And so we wanted to talk about emotional well-being and mental health, and throw some things out that people could think about, reference maybe. So with me today is a good friend of mine, Eric Colette. He's the principal and CEO of A Mind for All Seasons, LLC. This has been a labor of love for you. You really enjoyed
Absolutely.
this.
I geek out over this
Yes,
stuff.
you really geek.
I'm playing, yes.
So you're gone almost every week now. You travel all over the country.
2 or 3 times a month, probably.
Yes, yes. Oh my goodness. You were assisted living. You did that for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
Then you worked with the memory care. Mm-hmm. Did a tremendous job there, by the way.
Thank you.
And then I feel that I have some responsibility for you jumping out. Because I think one time we had lunch, I go, you really should do your own thing. And I didn't hear much about it.
It's all because of you, Mark.
I know
that was
it
the
is.
catalyst.
Yeah. You can keep those payments coming. And then all of a sudden you go, oh yeah, I'm leaving the memory care. I'm going, wait a minute. I was, just anyhow. So awesome, and just a wonderful person. I think one of your skill sets or talents is your ability to connect with people. And when you're working with folks that are struggling with, dementia or an Alzheimer's diagnosis, that is so helpful. because I think that's difficult for many people. And especially the couple I had in the other day that were struggling a little bit. She was really having a hard time. And they have your phone number, by the way.
I had a great conversation with them.
Oh, very good. Oh,
in the Reagan Airport just the other day. So,
oh, excellent.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is a resource, and you should keep track of it, by the way. Drew.
Yes.
We got 2 from Keystone. We've had 3 of you. You 2 are, I won't say, well, we had Mike yesterday, and so thank you for you 2 coming.
Glad to be here.
I've known Mike for a long time too. That goes back.
Everyone knows Mike.
Yeah, well, that's true. Drew, you're a chaplain at Keystone, which I'm going to find very interesting in our discussion. We'll find out too. That there's a number of things. And so you were pursuing a career in music.
Yeah.
Guitar?
So my undergrad is in music, basically in vocal performance.
Oh, vocal, okay.
But I also play guitar, and it's part of what I do with patients I meet with. And then my graduate degree is in what's called spiritual formation and soul care. So I'm trained as a spiritual director, which is a great complement as a chaplain.
Oh, very good. So I mentioned yesterday that I did vocal lessons in college, and I do play guitar, and we have an old man band.
Awesome.
So
We should be playing here.
Yeah.
I started college as a piano and saxophone
Yes, that's
performance
right.
major and
Yeah,
still teach
there
music
you go.
history classes.
Yeah,
so
I love
we could
it.
Make a go
So
of this.
Shanon, do you play or sing?
Absolutely not.
We were doing pretty good there too.
Every
you
band
know?
needs a groupie.
Oh, there you go.
That's right.
All right,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah,
You got 3 little kiddos.
Yes.
And a wife, and you guys do hiking. We were just talking about camping a minute ago. Do you do camping too, or?
Sometimes. I'm just starting to step into that with my kids. They're
Very good.
pretty young. So
What ages?
7, 5, and 3.
Oh, the perfect age to go camping.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And like I said, especially when it was snowing. Whew, that got a little chilly. Very good. And the aquarium, I love aquariums. We were just down in Tampa Bay, and we had to go do the aquarium. The one in Boston, by the way, is 3 stories. So if you ever get to Boston, you should go do that. Really, 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 oh my gosh. Shanon, Roche, thank you for being here. You're a social worker. My son just finished his master's degree in social work.
Oh, amazing.
Yes. We told him to do something else, but he persisted anyway.
Well,
So
we're hiring, so send him my way.
I will mention it. He's the youngest, and so he tends to tell me what he's going to do.
Awesome.
Although he did say thank you for keeping me in mind. Degree in psychology, and then you took that into social work. And so you've worked with children, expectant mothers, parents, and older adults in Chicago, Philadelphia, New Jersey. Why did you come to Idaho?
It's a long story. I don't think I should get into it.
Okay,
But
that's
ever
fine.
since-
I just thought those are really interesting places,
Yes.
and now you're in Boise, and you probably like that.
I'm from Chicago. That's the most important thing to know about me. And
Very good.
I've been here since 2015 and done some work in home health, and now been doing hospice for a couple of years.
So do you like Boise? Do you like the area?
Yeah, I love it.
Awesome. Very, very good. I'm supposed to say something about Diet Coke.
It's usually with me at all times.
Got it. All right. All right. So what we're trying to do in this session, what we'd love to do is give people maybe some tools, some thoughts, some resources on maintaining their mental well-being, mental health, which I think maybe is an undervalued casualty in the caregiving world. Did I say that well enough? Does that give us something to chew on?
I think there's a lot we could pull on there. Plenty of threads to yank.
Okay, well, and I'd like to do that. I'd like to do that. So, Shanon, you're the social worker here. Maybe you could kind of set that up for us. As a caregiver, what are we seeing?
Well, obviously, Drew and I come from the hospice world, so one of the primary concepts that we are dealing with our families is grief. And there's something called anticipatory grief as well, where a lot of our patients and their families' grief journey starts before that person passes, right? It's starting when they get some type of dementia diagnosis or a terminal illness diagnosis. So that's a lot of the work that we're doing with our families. And of course, our patients as well are grieving a lot of different losses, right? Their loss of independence, maybe their loss of their home if they have to move into, a care facility. And for the families, the sometimes loss of that parent that they knew as they knew them as their caregiver, that now they're having to take over that role. And of course, preparing grief-wise for that person to eventually reach end of life. So that's what I think is a good place to start.
Yeah, so Eric, that anticipatory grief with your work in the dementia area, that's big.
I see it all the time with people. I think people, though, when it comes to emotion, really get hung up on trying to judge what they and others are feeling, trying to figure out, should I be feeling this, should I not be feeling this? Are you acting out of your dementia, or is this just you behaving badly? And when we get spun up trying to judge emotion, it's less effective than observing and labeling it and recognizing it. We have more control when we just observe and label our emotions than judging them.
Can't, because I see this. I shouldn't feel this way, right? I just shouldn't feel this way. And I don't know, do we have control over not feeling this way?
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge how we feel.
Yeah.
For some reason, we have a mental health care system and a healthcare system, as if you could sort of cut it all off at the neck.
Got it.
And yet we feel because of neurochemistry. We have feelings because we have an experience, and it gets filtered through our beliefs, our attitudes, our values, our prior knowledge, our neuroanatomy, and it just pops out the other end as a neurochemical thing called a feeling, and it happens. And in the moment that it happens, it's absolutely real.
Yeah.
And it's a physical experience. And we don't choose it. We always get to choose our response.
Got it.
But in the moment that it happens, it's just a physical reality. And I think we get further when we accept that and acknowledge that.
Got it. So Drew, picking up on that, is that kind of where you get to step in, is like, this has happened, this is your feeling?
Yeah. So I like to pull from a little of both of these disciplines and then focus in on spiritual beliefs. And if a person is having a fair amount of spiritual anxiety, talking through their belief system, and if there's any component of that might be hindering peace at end of life.
Oh, very good.
And with lots of different generations, there might be many different belief systems, or there might be different nuances of a similar belief system that can impact each other. So trying to work through that with a whole family system as well, because sometimes different generations can impact each other with the way that they see end of life, the goals of end of life.
Yeah, what he said. So let me throw this out there and see if this, I don't know that this takes us anywhere, but is there any way that we can prepare for these things? Or no, once the crisis happens, that's where we are. You want to start, Eric? Is there any way that anything we can do before?
I think yes and no. I think learning to observe your emotional experience is a learned skill. I think being able to recognize, I'm feeling anxious. I'm starting to carry some tension in my shoulders. My back tightens up, or I'm gritting my teeth, or just observing physical symptoms.
Did I talk to you this morning? I mean, that seems very familiar.
Mark, you're tightening up again.
Oh my gosh.
You seem anxious.
Yeah.
So that is a learned skill. And I think the more that we practice that with ourselves, and the more we're observant, and the more we practice observing and putting effective emotional labels on what others seem to be feeling. It's when we're in a conversation with one of our children, for example, and we say, "You seem frustrated, you seem upset, or you seem ecstatic, or you seem really pleased by that."
Because we tend to boil that down to like 3 different things with our kids.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. and we use very general emotional terms like, are you really angry, or are you just mildly irritated? Or are you so furious you can hardly stand it? So the more you practice being specific in your emotional labels, and there's actually a lot of social science research on this, the more successful you are in being aware and having a high degree of emotional intelligence. So I think to the extent that someone does that on a consistent basis and is really dialed into their own emotional experience and that of others, they're more resilient and more prepared when things come up. But until you've actually experienced something, you just don't know how you're going to respond.
Well, we've mentioned that a couple of times. The great philosopher Mike Tyson said, everybody has a game plan until they get punched in the face. Mm-hmm. And so part of this is, I like what you're saying, is practice. Mm-hmm. Make it a skill. It's not particularly a talent. Some people maybe have a talent, but we can all learn it. All right, very good. So, Drew, if we were to take from where Eric took us on a spiritual side, does that fit back into what Eric is telling us?
Yeah, definitely. Being aware of one's anxiety and emotions is really important from many perspectives, obviously, but to add a spiritual element to that, if there are certain beliefs that are causing anxiety, to pay attention to what those are. And oftentimes what I will like to focus on with people, if I can have a conversation, is what are the beliefs that they know in their head, and then what are they experiencing? And is there dissonance between those things? So I might believe that I might believe in a God who is sovereign and divine, but I'm suffering for some reason, and I have a hard time trusting the goodness of divine in my life. And so that creates a dissonance between emotion and the beliefs of the individual, and trying to find some resolution with that within their belief system. And so I think that's really important for people to be aware of in their circumstances, if they're finding dissonance between their feelings and what they believe about the divine or about their self-worth. And so that's where I would use that as a launching point with spirituality and with belief, is being aware of those emotions and seeing, does that fit with what I believe? If not, where's the tension in that? And being able to write that down or talk with somebody about that to have some resolution in some of that dissonance that they feel.
So it seems to me, both on an emotional, and it's hard to separate emotion out of a more spiritual side, but on both of those, it would be really wise to develop the skill of understanding or identifying. Did that make sense? Did I say that well enough that we can move forward, or do you want to clean that up for me?
I agree, and I think to Drew's point, learning how to sit with some uncertainty and to balance that out and to be objective about it a little bit, to kind of step out of yourself and say, I'm feeling this and I'm having these kinds of thoughts, and what's driving that? Where is it coming from?
Got it.
Again, those are learned skills.
Well, it seems to me that in our society, the instant gratification thing means I don't want to sit and deal with this emotion or this spiritual dissonance. And so they want to move fast and move past it. And you're saying, maybe not so fast.
Yeah,
let it stew in your juices for a moment.
And that touches into a lot of religious beliefs too. Many different religions have spiritual practices that one can participate in that help with waiting, help with anxiety, and having peace in those things. So there's specific practices that we can engage with that help us with our emotions and with waiting and with patience in the midst of difficulty.
So Shanon, you're sitting here going, yeah, you guys, that's fine, that's wonderful. But from a very practical standpoint, not everybody catches on that this is what's going on with them.
Yeah.
And you kind of sit in a place where, it's like, I hate talking to a dentist or an orthodontist because they're looking at my teeth, it's like, or at least I feel like you're looking at my teeth, and but you're sitting there going, oh yeah. Is that right? Do you see this? I mean, because sometimes you got to be the one that sees this.
Absolutely. I totally, agree with what points have been made so far. The only thing I could add to it is the original question was about being prepared. I think as a culture at large, we're largely afraid to look at these things, look at and anticipate what older age looks like, what our parents' aging is going to look like, what our aging is going to look like, and preparing for, of course, end of life, and having those types of conversations with our loved ones is really hard because we want to avoid talking about those things. So I think as a culture in America, part of being prepared for these crises that might come up is to just be fully aware of what we're looking at if we live past, 70 years old, or our parents do.
So you're suggesting from the standpoint of being the old guy, there is much I can do to be ready for what will go 70 plus, 75, 80. We can be somewhat prepared by anticipating and understanding and then getting strong with ourselves. What are you saying?
Yeah, I think just acknowledging that the way we function today is not how we're going to function 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now. And
oh no, I'm worried that I will be.
Whether it's cognitively or physically, likely we're going to have declines. So how can we prepare ourselves cognitively and emotionally for those things? And think about the different changes that are going to take place in our life for sure if we make it that far, and prepare by having obviously introspection, but also like conversations with our loved ones about what our wishes are.
So that's one of the things that's come up a number of times is the plan, or planning, and along with that is the conversation with the kids. Mm-hmm. Right, bring them in, or your network, if you will. If it's not kids, is it siblings, or friends? So, Eric, we're going to come back to this a little bit later, but we can do things that strengthen our cognitive health and can help us maintain that for longer than I think people understand.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges that we face in our culture is that we somehow have this imaginary line, and I don't know where it is, but we have this line where people assume that once you've crossed over that, you're on the other side of the hill, and that decline is inevitable.
63.
63,
know, yeah.
or 63.25, right?
That's pretty close.
Yeah, okay, so you cross that, and it's all downhill from there.
Yeah.
And just because things are common doesn't mean that they're a normal part of aging. Now, kind of to Shannon's point, I think part of what you were saying, Shanon, is that the elephant in the room is that we're all going to die. Mm-hmm. The number one cause of death is birth. Yeah. And I, for one, think it's good that we didn't get a one-way ticket. I'm glad there's a round-trip ticket in this deal.
My mother is 85, and a friend of hers that was over 100 just passed away, and she is dead set on not getting to 100. She doesn't want to be 100 years old. She's okay if she goes anytime, but that's kind of normalized thinking in a way, right?
I think part of embracing our humanity and embracing the reality that end of life will come to all of us is also not ignoring the fact that if we are inattentive, that our trajectory could look very different than if we are really focused on the choices that we make. Type 2 diabetes, for example, has gone up 30% in the last few decades, and Alzheimer's disease, which I deal with regularly, is nicknamed diabetes of the brain for a reason. And if you make choices that don't lead you down the path toward type 2 diabetes, that decision alone will greatly affect your cognitive health. So instead of living in denial that at some point I will reach end of life, and instead of living in denial that these things might happen, if we're more proactive, we might say it's easier to prepare and prevent than repair and repent.
Well, yeah, that's easy to say, but we've got a society, the media, it's all about youth. It's all about looks and being vibrant, as well as very destructive behaviors that they glorify. I mean, that's a really kind of a contradiction there, but that's what we see. So how do we fight that? Drew, how do we fight that? This is what we see on TV and on the internet. All these young, good looking, even if they're into their 70s, they're still very bright, vibrant. And then the flip side of that is destructive behaviors that Eric's talking about. How do you fight that?
Yeah, I mean, how long can we talk?
Well, we've got about half an hour.
Yeah. Combating the messages that we are given is a huge part of that conversation, of embracing our own limitations and humanity. Is a really important thing that we need to consider, and recognizing our own choices and not responding as being aware of our surroundings and how we respond to that. So not responding almost like a victim to just what we're being fed.
So we need to take control, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Take control, and at the very least be aware of the messages that we're given and the messages that we buy into. Because we all have different messages that can sometimes get locked in that are helpful for us to be aware of. And I think that those are important to be aware of on a number of different levels, both with mental health and spiritually. There's a lot of ways that we can combat that by having a sense of peace with our own mortality.
Well, and I think particularly the messaging is anti-spiritual. I mean, it's the here and now and the instant gratification that we were talking about. There's not a lot of spiritual messaging out there in the mainstream. And I'm not even sure what mainstream media means, but if you watch TV, there's not much on a spiritual side. And there's some, it seems to me that there's some backlash against a spiritual message. People are not responding well to that. Okay, from a family situation, because most of what you see is in a family situation, right? I mean, there's a handful of people that don't have anybody.
Those are the hardest ones.
Those are tough.
To work with, yeah.
Well, although families aren't necessarily easy.
Yes, true.
Speaking from families, I know families a little bit.
I'm sure you do.
We're interesting.
Yeah.
So speaking in a family situation, what do you see? How do you see it? What is it that you can do to help? I mean, because you're kind of stepping in at the crisis, whether they've prepared for it or not.
Right. Yes, we are. Usually the day they meet us is a very hard day for everybody, the patient and the family. So we, of course, encounter what we call family dynamics, but they're definitely, when these high stress situations come about, can result in conflicts, right? Disagreements on whether their loved one should be on hospice or should continue with curative treatments. also just like multi-decade old, situations that have happened that come to the surface when we're meeting with these people for the first time. What we're doing as a team is taking kind of a multidisciplinary approach to addressing those dynamics as best as we can. We have social worker there, we have chaplain there, and obviously our healthcare professionals to try to support these individuals and as a group through this really difficult day and time. And so, yeah, sometimes it takes multiple meetings as a group, the family and the team all together trying to come to conclusions on what path to take forward. And other times, people are, like we talked about before, more prepared for this. Maybe they've been through it before. A lot of those kinks have been worked out, and it's a smoother, transition. But we definitely do our best to try to mitigate some of those conflicts as best we can.
Well, the discussion we were having just before this session was with Yvette Primero. She's with the agency, the area agency on aging.
Sure.
And she's from a Mexican culture, so multi-generational, if not in the home, then really pretty close.
Sure.
It seems to me that one of the benefits, there's plenty of challenges, but one of the benefits is seeing that whole life process, right? They're growing up and they see mom and dad, or grandma and grandpa get older, and then mom and dad and aunts and uncles step in. And it was fascinating to me because when it was time, when grandma moved down to New Mexico, she would pick up the kids and go down and visit because she needed help. And I said, well, they're teenagers. Don't they balk at that? And she said, I know. It's just, we've modeled that. That's a model, and so they're used to that. And I think we used to do that. Mm-hmm. Quite a bit, but our society now, it's a little bit different. And so, what are some of the other things you think that you can think of that we might do to prepare for that situation, or a dementia diagnosis? Are there other things individually we can do, and then maybe as a family, are there some other things that we can do? We'll talk about health-wise in a minute, but just on the emotional side, are there other things that we can do? Shanon, we'll let you take the first swing.
I guess part of what our interventions would include is education. Of course, just letting people know, like you said, what we likely will see going forward. And I don't know if Eric wants to jump in. It sounds like this is something that you probably have a lot to say about.
He's got good stuff. Can I ask it a different way maybe to you?
Sure.
And you can say, no, I don't want to address that. But now that you're in this field doing this, mm-hmm. What has changed with you?
What has changed with me? Well, I guess before I got started working in hospice, I did home health, which is a completely different approach to care. Many times we're looking at a recovery for those individuals, right? That's what the goal is, for them to be rehabbed and get back to their life as it was. Hospice is a completely different approach to care. It's a huge shift in focusing on quality of life and comfort only. And I thought it would be so sad. It was just going to be a thing that I was crying every day. It was death equals tears. And what I found doing this work is that it's not the case at all. Is a lot of what we do very sad? The things that we see sad? Absolutely. But there's also something very beautiful about walking alongside a family when their loved one is at end of life, and sacred in that process as well, and joyful. So I feel like that's the primary way that I've changed doing this work.
So Eric, I'm going to jump with her a little bit. Anything that we should talk about as far as preparing for that situation other than health-wise? I mean, emotionally. We talked about learning to identify them and sit with them. What about a family?
I think one of the most important things any family can do is take stock of the quality of their relationships right now. And people sometimes get overwhelmed trying to figure out, well, how do we fix this big issue? And I think it's often simpler than that. It starts with asking, what is the next right step? If my goal is to strengthen my relationships so that when I do get to an end-of-life situation, that we're already comfortable talking to each other, that there's already a high degree of emotional support, that we're not playing catch-up, then what could I do today to strengthen the relationships that I already have in my family? And just take the next right step.
So Drew, he mentions that there's a goal to strengthen that relationship. Do you find that's where most people are? Is now they're looking at the family and, dang it, I wish I had a better relationship, or I'm glad I got a good one. Is that what you see?
Like between family members?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the things that I focus on in my role a lot with our patients and within the family system is what we call meaning making. And before I came to work on hospice, I was working more in the university setting. So we're talking about vocation and planning and what do you want to do with your life. And this is the other end of that, and focusing on what has my life been about, what has been important, what are the things that spiritually or events that have happened in my life, what has provided a lot of worth and value in my life, and having that connection also with family. And sometimes that's creating moments with a family to talk about what's been meaningful, what's been hopeful, what has been life-giving, how has, sometimes I'll invite people to share, how has this person impacted your life? And tell your loved one that. So creating conversations around meaning and worth and value that has happened in their life, whether that is added spiritually, and sometimes I'm focusing with people that don't have a spiritual element, having meaning making within that range of generations and in various different types of spirituality, I feel like has been very important.
And the underlying message there is they certainly don't have to wait until there's a crisis to come back in and work on particularly family relationships, I think. Mm-hmm. And then, Eric, do you see from an Alzheimer's or a dementia standpoint that those that have the stronger family relationships are handling this a little bit better, and maybe their cognitive health is a little bit better, a little longer?
Great question. And there's a lot to unpack there. I would just say, for starters, that the more socially engaged we are and the higher the quality of our social relationships, the more we have some resilience against cognitive decline. It's one of many factors that affects it, but it's one of many controllable factors that affects it. So I think prioritizing relationships makes a difference for all of us.
Well, and certainly the family is a great place to start that. I mean, we can have our buds, and I've got my old man band, and those are great things. Of course, music is also helpful.
Yes, true.
Thank you.
True.
Shannon, you just gotta get on board here, you know? Maybe you could do the kazoo or something.
Absolutely, the tambourine.
There you go, yeah. So we don't need to wait to develop that, and the family seems to be a great place to get started with those connections. And so if we were to start today, let's say that you got an old fat guy who's 63, and he's starting to think, okay, I got to do some things. What would you recommend? Where to start as far as those relationships?
So I'm glad you specified as far as relationships, because
we'll get there.
There's a lot we could do.
I know.
But I I think actually the work of Shanon and Drew points in the direction of where to start. I've worked with a lot of different hospice agencies over the years. I'm a huge fan of hospice. And when I was running memory care and assisted living communities, I had the conversation about hospice on day one. I wanted to set the stage for people that we're not afraid to talk about death, and that it's a very normal, natural part of life, and it's something that we're going to embrace. And I found that people kind of let down their guard, and they relaxed a little bit when I was able to start that conversation. But I'm sure that one of the things that Shanon and Drew would say that they have seen and experienced in their own lives is something that I've felt personally, and that's that when you work around people who are facing end of life, it changes you in some good ways. I am much more likely to have meaningful conversations with my wife and with my children and with my parents, and to tell them what specifically they've done that has made a difference for me. Or even to be honest if I'm frustrated because I want to work through it, because I'm reminded on a constant basis that we never know when that last day is going to come. And when you're around that, I think it changes you in a positive way. It makes you more likely to tell people what you need to tell them all along and not wait till you're on your deathbed to do it.
You agree?
He said it better than I did, so thank you.
Well, he's been around a while,
Yeah.
and very good. All right, so from a cognitive health perspective, you've mentioned a couple of things that people can do. For example, diabetes, that's a plague of this particular generation. Sugar and high fructose corn syrup are somewhat available. Other than that, you mentioned that again, that's fine, but are there some other things that we should be doing? I like the music part. I think people should really be involved with music, and it seems to me listening to music is good too. It's not like, oh, if you don't play the guitar, then don't worry about it, or the saxophone or the piano. Is that right?
Yes. So are there other things that we could do? There's so much that we could do.
Well, give us some simple things that somebody could start today. There's lots of information they can be gathering and education, and you can help with that. But just maybe even starting today, what are some things?
Yeah, one of the top things people could start with is physical activity. If it's moderate activity like walking, 60 minutes a day. Doesn't have to be all at once. Could be split up. But
10,000 steps.
There you go. But getting physical activity every day, at least 5 days a week, dramatically reduces your risk of Alzheimer's disease. And one of the reasons why is that physical activity releases a growth factor for brain cells called brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
Yeah, sure.
So say that 5 times fast, right?
I can't say it once,
So if you want some miracle grow for brain cells, go out and exercise.
And do some just even walking.
Yeah. So move. Our bodies were made to move. We need to keep moving.
Now, do you see this as a particular challenge in a hospice situation? Can you keep them moving? Does it help if they do?
It's less of a goal within hospice to get them to move. It really depends upon the diagnosis that they have and where they're at in their disease process. If we can get them to move, getting them in their chair, getting them to go and do one of their hobbies, getting out in their garden, going to, sometimes we've taken people to go fishing, or do some of our veterans, we take them on a last flight. So if they're mobile, we want to do things with them until they are not able to move and are bedbound.
So that's fairly consistent. So motion, moving, walking, breathing, I think is part of that probably too. Mm-hmm. It's good to get out and get breathing.
Well, to that point, many people don't realize that they actually don't breathe very well, especially at night. I and at our brain therapy studio, we constantly are testing people for oxygenation at night, and we find a lot of untreated obstructive and central sleep apnea. You can be very thin and have central sleep apnea where your brain just forgets to tell you to breathe enough.
Oh, goodness.
And if you don't have enough oxygen all night long, it's going to impact not only your brain, but just your
health.
your stamina.
Yeah.
Overall, you're not going to do very well.
I can see that. Okay, so breathing, walking, motion, what else? Somebody just today could say, listen, I'm going to write down the top 5 things, 3 things. What else would you add to that?
Yeah, I'd add definitely the way that we eat. And everyone argues over diet, trying to figure out the perfect diet. And I think it's more important to recognize some key principles. Number 1 is that food is fuel. And the way that we need to fuel our engine depends on how we're running it. The 90-year-old that's been sedentary for 40 years and has major metabolic problems needs to eat very differently than my 17-year-old son who runs 5 to 10 miles a day in cross country.
Yeah.
So food is fuel, and we've got to be thoughtful about what the engine needs. We also have to be thoughtful about managing our sugars, because insulin resistance and chronic inflammation are drivers of many of the top killers today, and many of the things that wreck our quality of life, both cognitively and just our overall physical system. So eating a diet that's very high in good fats, avocados, olives, extra virgin olive oil, nuts, seeds, those kinds of things, tons of vegetables, that's going to be really, really helpful for people in terms of controlling their sugars. So that's a massive area. And then I would add to that really checking certain key nutrients. Just B12 deficiency alone, for example, can cause a person to have psychosis. And then they might get put on psychotropic medications that have some pretty nasty side effects. And one of the reasons that people statistically live a lot longer on hospice is that we discontinue medications that may be causing problems. So looking at root causes, like if you take an acid reducer, Prilosec, for example, those acid reducers are only meant to be used for 2 or 3 weeks. But people pop them like candy long term because they don't necessarily take a look at, well, why do I have reflux in the first place? What's going on? Am I chronically using ibuprofen and that's messing up the gut bacteria? Am I eating a highly inflammatory diet? And am I drinking alcohol an hour before bed? That's going to cause some reflux. So instead of taking that medication long term and causing malabsorptive disorders where we can't absorb the nutrients that we need and therefore our bodies are depleted, looking at root causes in everything that we do is low-hanging fruit for a lot of people.
Okay, so one of the things that I'm hearing here is, and all 3 of you, I'll say it differently than you would, but it's being very intentional with our life, starting at any point. And we don't have to wait till we're on hospice to start being intentional. We can start that now, and we can examine the physical, the emotional, the cognitive, the spiritual. These are all things then that we can start with now. I'm kind of at that point, like, if I go much further this way, we're going to be here for the rest of the day, and we're not scheduled to be here for the rest of the day. Or do we kind of bring this in a little bit? And then, so I think we got to bring it in a little bit. Being very intentional, which of course I think all of you said this to a certain extent, we got to be self-aware. But we're not good at that. We're not really good. I mean, that's not a skill we're born with. And as you said before, we tend to not have that ability to identify what it is that we're living with. So where's a good place to start for that? If we were going to be intentional about our health, our spirituality, where's a good place to start? The health, I like that. You gave us some really good stuff. And, you're going to tell us also in a minute how to get more of that and contact you.
Sure.
So physical, I like that. What else can we do to be intentional about where we are? I like the relationship stuff that we talked about. Spiritually.
Yeah, so spiritually, a few things come to mind, and mainly, whatever we've left neglected or unaddressed is going to come up at the end of life, whether we like it or not. And if you
mean we can't shove it down forever? We just keep packing it in there?
No.
It's going to come out.
Whether you believe in an afterlife or not, having some resolution on that, because people's anxiety and fear comes up when they're sitting on their deathbed and they are taking labored breaths and they're wondering what's going to happen next. If they don't have peace in that, we see a lot of fear and agitation that comes up when people are sitting there. We're not going to have our phone and our TV to be able to see at the end of life. We're left with our thoughts and our feelings, and
that's
we have
horrible.
peace with what's inside.
I can't believe you just said that.
I'm just going to put it right out there.
Talk about being terrified.
Yeah, so some ways to prepare that I think are really important within that. One is practicing prayer or meditation, getting away from devices, being okay with our own thoughts, and practicing prayer and meditation.
People don't have that skill at all.
It's not what's fun and exciting. But it's what can provide a lot of peace and calm.
I'll bet that really affects us cognitively as well. That ability 100%. To just be quiet for a minute. Oh,
absolutely.
My God.
And if you have a particular spiritual belief, knowing what things that you want at end of life in particular. So practicing those over your lifetime, but what do you want at the end of life? What are your goals? And communicating that with family members, whether they have the same beliefs or not, making sure that they know what those things are. Because sometimes we find conflict in family, or people are, our loved ones are left guessing what they want at the end of life. And having those things resolved and communicated, I think, is also very important.
I've seen more than a little bit of conflict at the end, because the family... Well, mom or dad they were not clear with what they wanted to have happen, and then the kids are left guessing, and or I don't care what mom wanted. This is what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
Shannon, we got just a couple more minutes. Anything you want to add to what we've talked about? Anything. We'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about how we can become more self-aware, and I think part of that could come from work with a professional. If you feel like you are struggling emotionally, as many of us are, given what's been going on in our world and just in our maybe personal lives. And
I think we're changing, the society is changing the perception a little bit, hopefully, about working with a professional.
Absolutely, you can do it online. I mean, it's something you don't even have to leave your house to do now. So just also seeking out those supportive people in your life and strengthening connections with them. And, Drew in his work a lot of times focuses also on things like meditation and just self-reflection. So I think journaling, meditating, seeking out professional help, those are all things that can really help us to be more self-aware.
Yeah.
So we can identify when we feel we're starting to need more support.
Been a lot of work on gratitude and expressing gratitude. There's just some tremendous studies that have been done on that. Quickly, how do we get hold of you?
You can reach out to us at amindforallseasons.com or call us at 208-378-2860.
Keystone, how do we get hold of you guys?
Keystone, you can give us a call or you can email us.
Or headed to the website. We're also on Facebook.
Okay. And the website is keystonehospice.org. Very good. Thank you. This was a great discussion. I know we could do a day on this easy. Oh my gosh. But we're not going to. So we're going to take a break. We call it the bio break, please. And we'll see you back here in just a few minutes.